Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Healing Art After Hours. I'm Shauna Robeson with Creating Space Coastal. And in this video, I'm going to be doing Collage by Numbers, which is basically taking a paint by numbers pattern and filling it in with collage. And I did a couple of different styles. One was following the patterns exactly. And then one was sort of I went rogue and kind of freestyle. I didn't finish the pattern. I will be doing that off camera, and hopefully I'll post the picture with the video. But it is a slow process, but it's fun. It's very meditative. So if you'd like to see how I did it, please join me. Thank you. Let's get started. And I did put a link in both the descriptions of the class, the workshop. I did put a link to this. So if you do want to follow along with the same paint by numbers background, we're going to be doing collage by numbers, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. But anyway, this pattern, I do have a link on both the meetup and the Eventbrite description. So that link will take you to where you can download this and print it. And you can draw your own. You don't have to use this either, but I just thought I tried to find an easy one to use. This one has very bold lines. And so you may either want to cover those lines, or you can just trace the pattern onto a blank sheet of paper with pencil if you want it to be lighter, or else you can make it look more like stained glass. So basically, I had this idea, and I have not done it, so we're kind of experimenting together. But I thought that this was a fun way to try out. It's kind of like mosaic collage, where we're going to be cutting out the pieces and putting them in the pattern. And this just tells us the shapes of the pieces, and it tells us what color they need to be. So all you need to do is look through your stash to find the color I think it has them in order of when it wants you to actually lay them down. So starting with 1, I mean, there's other like 2s here, and there's some 2s over there too. But and of course there's creative license, so you can follow along with the colors that they suggest. You can create your own color palette and just maybe put a little, with a marker, you could mark down the colors that you want to use if you want to change the color scheme. I did also print off this owl, which is kind of funny because when I overlay it, it almost looks like the same exact owl. But I just wanted an idea of what the markings and colorings of a real owl look like, because I wanted, while I'm not trying to make it, too much realism, I do want to kind of, think about these fun textures. I mean, owls are very interesting and have a lot of great texture. So I just wanted to think about that as I was choosing the pieces that I'm going to be using. And you can approach this a number of different ways. Now, what I did ahead of time, and I recommended on the notes, was to print off the pattern offline onto some kind of translucent paper. Now, this is a parchment paper. And parchment paper is used for baking, so it's heat resistant. But the great thing about it is it's translucent, and it's very thin, and it's great for using for collage in your work by putting stamps on or creating your own paper. Now, I unfortunately chose this version that has a smart grid on it, so it's got these markings on the paper, kind of like a watermark, and I don't like that because I wanted to use this for fodder for collage, but it's not going to work for that. But it worked fine for this type of thing. I also printed it off on, I was trying out some different things, and I tried it on vellum. I think actually this was tracing paper. So you can also print on vellum or tracing paper. You can also take tissue paper, cut it down to size, tape it onto printing paper, and then you can also print on that as well. You just have to make sure to get it really flat and tape down really good with some painter's tape. Now, I tried to do a napkin, and I know it's possible, but I don't think I got all the wrinkles out, and it did not work. And I don't know if it's my printer, but I've seen other people do it. So anything that's translucent will work. And so I have the pattern on there, and I don't need to, but I just wanted to try some different things. I also printed it directly onto my page that I'm going to be working on. But if you don't like I said, the bold lines, you could just work on a blank piece of paper, and you can either just try to piece the pieces together like a puzzle, or you could do like a tracing with some kind of transfer or carbon paper. So you could do that and get the lines lighter on your page. It's kind of up to you how you want to approach it. I'm just bringing up some different ways to do it. I'm going to go ahead and work on this paper because I think if the black is showing underneath, I can either cover it with like something else if I want, or keep it black and have it look like a little like stained glass. So I thought that was kind of cool, at least for the background. I for sure like the idea of the background being stained glass. So I think I'm going to leave that space in between and not cut my pieces out is big. But again, you can decide. Now you'll notice if you look at these numbers that this is a 2, this is a 2, this is a 2, you know, these are all 2s. So you can do a couple of things. You can either cut out each of these pieces. Again, it's more like a stained glass design, or you could cut out this entire shape and have it be one piece if you want. So it's up to you to decide. You'll see that throughout this, like these are all 8s. The next rung is all 8s. These are 8s. So it's up to you to decide. I'm going to piece them out because I think that's more interesting. The other thing you can do, and this is why I wanted to try this out, is if you were designing a collage where you wanted it to be representative of something, you could basically think of the pieces of paper like brush strokes. So I could maybe make this whole shape a piece of paper, or I could make tear a bunch of smaller pieces, almost like feathers, and lay them down and make it look like an actual owl. So it depends on what look you're trying to get. And I thought that this was just a good way to kind of illustrate that idea. So if you were going to do an owl, you could draw your design on the paper with pencil. And then what you would do is take some clear paper and then find the different shapes that are in your artwork and trace them onto here. And then this will help you cut it out so that you can get the right shape for what you need. And you can glue them together, then cut the shape out. Like you can glue your little pieces together, then cut the shape out and put them down so that they fit right in, or else you could just kind of lay them and they overlay. So I thought it was just a good way to kind of think about this particular type of collage. This is very different than cutting out we're not going to be necessarily cutting out, a sun and then putting that here. We're going to be building the picture out of pieces, really small pieces that you're not going to really know necessarily what the parts are. So approach it however makes sense to you, and let's just get started. So I'm going to put this off to the side, and then on here I'm going to decide which thing I want to start with. And I think it's probably a little easier to maybe start along the edge because I'm going to be cutting up this paper. So I think starting along the edge and kind of working my way in makes sense. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this 8. This is the number 8 over here. And I'm going to look at what that color is. This is the color 8. And then I did a sort of a pre-sort of some of my materials, and I found things that have the color schemes in them because it would take me a really long time to go through all my paper fodder. And so I was trying to just take a little bit of a shortcut. But what I would do normally is I would just search through magazines and catalogs and things like that and look for this color. Now, this color here looks a lot like this 8 here. So now I can take this piece and I can go right over the top of that 8 piece, and I can try to tape it down or somehow attach to it, but that's going to take a little extra time. So I'm going to see if I can just do it without having to do that. We'll see how this goes. But the idea is that I'm going to, following these lines, I'm going to cut out that shape of my material. And now you could, if you want and you had time, you could cut this shape out first with scissors or with the blade, and then you could kind of hold it as you know, onto the page and do it that way. I'm going to try it this way first and see if this works, because I think it'll save me a little bit of time if I can make it work. And I'm cutting inside the black part because I want it to fit in kind of like that stained glass. And hopefully my blade is going to be sharp enough to do this as well. If you cut it out first, then you know, you could use scissors. Doing it this way, it's really hard to, you know, it'd be really hard to use scissors for this part. So now I have this piece, but I think what would be cool is to change up the source for each of these 8s if possible. So I'm going to look for some other variations of this color and see if I can find some, or something that's similar. It doesn't even have to be exactly that color. Like this is kind of in that color family. Maybe something with texture. So I'm going to look through real quick and see what I can find. Oh, here's something. Now make sure that you keep your finger out of the path of the blade. I probably don't have to tell you that, but I think it's worth mentioning just because sometimes we get hyper-focused on whatever the process is and we forget things. I think I got it all. I'm going to get all of my, I'm just going to get a section and then I'll glue them on at the same time. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I want to at least do some cutting and then some gluing. Okay, now let me find another. This one's a little darker version. This here, darker shade. I think that'll look cool. And again, I could come in with black and fill in if any white is showing. The other thing you can do is you could do the bigger shape and then glue these smaller pieces onto it so that the background is that color, but then you have the different pieces, but then you're not going to get the black in between, and that's okay. Really, anything goes. Okay, that one. I think with this kind of detailed cutting, I might use this blade. It's just designed for a little more detail. All right, I'm going to glue these pieces now because otherwise I feel like I'm going to start bumping them and they'll get lost, possibly. All right, so I'm just going to use some glue stick. When you're using glue stick, just make sure that you get especially around the edges so they don't lift up. And I'm using the glue stick because this is cardstock. It's not watercolor paper or a mixed media paper. So I just am concerned about it buckling if I were to use Mod Podge, but you can use whatever adhesive, you know, works for what your paper is. All right, so now I've got another 8 over here. Let's see if I can find Another interesting, oh, here's another interesting teal color. Now, if it gets tricky to cut, what you could do, this might be a good time, because as I cut more and more of this, it does get kind of tricky to hold on to it. And so I think using like a transfer paper, like I could lay this down, or I could put some pencil on the back of this and do it that way too. But I can trace onto this the shape. Like if it's a complicated shape and it's just maybe hard because of how much of the tracing paper you have, you could do it that way. And then in theory, should be, yeah, so the trace is here. So then I don't have to deal necessarily with the tracing paper. And you could do that again with it printed on a regular sheet. You could just make that a, you could put graphite on the back and then trace it onto your pieces. And that might be an easier way to do it even. So just, I'm kind of thinking of, different ideas as we go, along. I got it in the wrong spot there though. So that's one of the problems, is you got to get it. I got to get it in the right spot, because I went over these chairs and I didn't mean to do that. So I got to get it in the right spot first and then tuck my tracing, or tuck my carbon paper. Okay, I'm going to try that again. This time, not where the chairs are. All right, that's better. And then if, like, for example, I prefer to use scissors, I'm just going to demonstrate that way. I like using the blade or the scissors, but sometimes, depending on how complicated it is, it might make sense to use the one or the other. It's hard to see that carbon paper on the blue. Blue on blue isn't a great combination. This would be really impossible on like black, so really wouldn't work for a darker color unless you could use white somehow, but okay. Sometimes to round things, I'll use punches, like a round punch. But this I want to be kind of organic looking, so it's okay if it's not perfectly round. There we go. There's our center of the sun. And now we need a really pale blue. Make sure your project isn't underneath your blade. Cautionary tale. I don't remember which one. Make sure I get the right two. It's right here. Okay. Get the right puzzle piece. All right, let's see what other light blues I have. This one's fun. It's clouds. All right, there's another piece. A lot of skies. Okay. And another sky. I just think this makes it more interesting when it's not the same exact color and, without any texture. So I think this just gives it a little bit of some interest. Not even using it the way I think this might be easier for these small, weird angled cuts. Because normally I would rotate something to cut it, but I can't really rotate this to cut it because I have to keep all the parts in one spot. So it's a little bit trickier. Because I like to cut pulling it down this way, but this one I have to do it a little bit differently. All right, we got another piece of the pie. If you find that when you're trying to cut the paper tears, it could be the blade getting dull because they can dull fairly quickly when you're doing a lot of paper cutting. just a little reminder to please hit the like, subscribe button, or make a comment if you want to see more different content. Thank you. Let's get back to the program. I'm just doing what I said not to do. Don't cut onto your paper. For some of you who are coming to my class for the first time, you're probably like, this lady is a little scatterbrained. And yes, that's true, but we still have fun. And I show cautionary tales so that I can help you guys avoid the mistakes that I make. Oh my goodness. It's okay because we're going to be gluing a bunch of paper over it, so it's going to hold it together, but still. When things like that happen, you just have to take a deep breath and move on. Because things like that are bound to happen when you're exploring. And creating things is about exploring. It's about trying new things, experimenting. Some things work out, some things don't work out at all. But having patience with yourself and the process and never getting to the point where it stops the flow of creativity, that's when there's a problem. When you say, oh, I can't because I make too many mistakes, or, you know, that didn't go like I thought it was going to be. Just let it go and move on and just learn from it. Just think, oh, okay, well, I got to make sure that I keep my project, have a place to put my project while I'm cutting, or have my cutting board to the side, or, you know, just problem solve through how you're going to avoid to do that same problem, the same challenge next time. But don't spend too much time and energy beating yourself up about it. That's the key. Like I say, you know, think of yourself as a mentor for your creative child within. So your creative child is on a new journey and needs encouragement. Doesn't need to be criticized or judged, or we are human. And they say, fail forward. Do something, you make a mistake, you learn, and you move forward from it. The road to success is paved with lots of mistakes along the way. Okay. Here. And another 8. I do like 8, but, you know, I'm ready for some other colors. There's 2 there. Teal is my favorite color. Okay, let's go this one again. Move my project. I really like this piece here. I don't know if I should bring that in. Okay. Tempting. And then a 9. We have a 9. That's new. 9 is kind of this color is a little bit like the 9. What is that? Interesting texture to it. I mean, you could even put maps, or if you want something really interesting, maps have a lot of blue on them. One of the fun parts of collage is hunting in the limited magazine sources that I have and finding things that will work. Like I have a lot of Costco magazines, or I don't know, whatever my parents happen to have in their stash. So I don't have, I did actually, when I was traveling across the border this past week, I did get some nice National Geographics and things but I wouldn't use like a nice graphic for this. I just want pieces of stuff. So there's no sense in using, you could just use catalogs, and no sense in using really nice materials when you're just cutting out little shapes. So it's a good way to use up small scraps of paper or things out of your recycle bin. I think that's looking really cool though. And what I'm going to do, let's see, how are we doing on time? Maybe I'll just try to do this half for now, because I think we're going to run out of time to do the whole thing. And I think you get the idea. But I really like how it's turning out. And so what I think I'm going to do is go around it with the black between the different pieces, because they're not perfectly cut, and give it that stained glass look with an acrylic marker, or you can use a Sharpie or whatever you have. But black hides a multitude of imperfections. Why this one got cut so weird, but it's a little bit of a trim that. Don't bug me. There we go. Now, normally, if I wasn't trying to do everything within a camera angle, I would have a cutting area, and then I would have my gluing area, and so part of the challenge with this is that I'm trying to, of course, show you guys all of the parts of it. So, but what I would recommend is that you have your cutting area, and then your glue section and an assembly section, so that you don't accidentally cut your project. And then of course you need your section for your materials. Can take up a little bit of space. All right, so I thought that this would be better to do it using the carbon paper. So, because this is kind of a wonky shape. I'm going to go rogue for my owl. And, you know, I'm going to keep an eye on what they use. Like, it's mostly just different variations of brown. So they've got, you know, lighter piece for here. See how that goes. I'm not going to follow their exact things, but I'm going to try to generally use their color schemes. See how it goes. And 4 is kind of a gray. And actually, I found somewhere in here some cool eyes I wanted to use. I'm going to actually use the eyes, especially since I need to save time. I'll have to find them, but I think it was lemurs. Look at those eyes. They kind of look like the same size. So I think I'm going to use those. I'm going rogues. I can do whatever I want, guys. I might just use that. Doesn't that look like owl eyes? Okay. I'm going with it. All right. I like it. I like it. And then I can use some of, maybe some of this is kind of cool. This is a lot faster. It's a lot faster to go rogue. I'm not following the exact contour of this, but I'm just wiggling my blades so it looks like it's got contour. That's the shortcut to making it kind of look like you're following the contour. This is also really a nice texture. Because when you look at this owl, the original, that picture I had, it's got lots of, I mean, these even look like little squares. I can't get it to zoom. Let me see if I can get it to, looks like a checker pattern there. There's a line. So I'm just trying to channel some of those in these various textures that I'm throwing in there. This is that tool I showed before, but it has a little bit of that like kneadable eraser that's in there, and it's for moving things around. It's kind of tacky. So it also has a, you know, a little scrape tool and a poke tool. These are really cute birds I would have used for something else too, but everything's possibility, so I have to just use it. There will be other birds, and that's something you'll find when if you start getting into, you know, harvesting collage fodder, is that you could spend all your time just gathering and harvesting collage fodder and then taking away time from actually collaging. So just be careful not to get carried away. I like that. All right, maybe close to putting this guy together. It's the Franken owl, but it's kind of fun. And then you can always play around with, you know, using paints and things like that to bring things together. Okay, I know it looks weird right now, but I think I have the pieces to put this together. So I'm going to see what I can do here. Starting with those ears. I'm just going to scoop this down. Now, what you can do is if you put it together how you want it, then you can take a picture. I kind of messed it all up already, but you can take a picture of how it goes together. And that way, when you're assembling it, you can get it back the way you had imagined. So that's one way to help your process. But I've already kind of knocked everything loose. So I'm just going to see what happens. I'm going to try this. And I can always fill in and overlay and whatever down the road. But let me just give this a go. See what happens. In the interest of time, because we're already over time. One of the things I like to say a lot is it all works out in the end. If it's not worked out, it's not the end. So when you're working on an art project and you're like, oh my gosh, this is going south fast. Don't give up, give it time, see how it goes. If you know, I mean, there might be a point where you do have to walk away from it, but there's definitely in most cases kind of an ugly stage, if you will. And so be patient and see what happens if you spend a little more time, because it doesn't look good the whole process. The most important thing to think about is what goes under what. Sometimes you just leave a little bit of paper unglued because you want it to go underneath something. So you just leave the edge open until you get it glued down. But it can be a little bit tricky to glue in the proper order. That's why taking the picture helps, because you can then tell order of operation a little bit. You can glue things like upper levels together, like upper layers together first. So that's a strategy. It's kind of like reverse engineering. Instead of starting from bottom down and building up, you can glue the top layers together separately and then glue them down to your project. And sometimes that makes sense. This has a little flat tip, so, you know, if you're trying to lift up to get under something, this can be helpful. Just like I said, by creating kind of an organic edge, just helps it to blend in a little bit. I think this whole go rogue style, it works better for me. I'm enjoying that better than following along, but I think this gives me a good guide. Like, I mean, I got the shape of the owl and I kind of know where the feathers are, you know, so I can use it loosely or I can follow it exactly. I think either way can be fine, but I think for me, I like just, you know, piecing it together like this. I think is fun. And just feels more like the right way for me. So find your style. That's the important thing. And I certainly wasn't sure. I had my doubts, but I'm pleased with how it's coming along. And I find that happens a lot doing my artwork is, you know, I never know where it's going to go. I mean, maybe that's different for other artists, but I find that I'm just open to the exploration and trying to not set too many expectations so that I'm not disappointed, or, you know, I'll have an idea in my head. I had an idea in my head of how this whole project would go, but it certainly rarely goes how I imagine it in my head. So I've just gotten to the point where it's like, okay, just don't get too attached to how you imagine it in your head. And then you won't get too disappointed if it doesn't go the way that you think. And it's a lot less stressful when you go that route. All right, I got a little piece showing through here that I need to deal with. I'm just filling in some of those little gappies. And I want something that's not too far off from that color value because I don't want it to scream. It's kind of more browns over there. So I'm just trying to find something that has some similar value and color. And then I'll get a general shape and then I can trim it down. Actually, like that filling in that chest a little bit more. I'm in some ways a recovering perfectionist. So to be able to let go and just let things happen as they do and not be too attached to my expectations or whatever plan I had, it has really been freeing, and really creating an art has been a way that I've learned to embrace that, believe it or not. And so it definitely is a lot less stressful than being so attached to one particular outcome, I must say. Okay, I think this is kind of a cool texture here for right in there. So I'll just demonstrate that as they popped into my head. So if you are doing it like I'm doing it now, where you're building, and let's say I have this shape here, what I could do is I could take a sheer, now I would take a blank piece of sheer tracing paper. I could go to this shape and I could trace that out with the pencil. Or if I wanted it to be bigger, I could just draw out the shape that I'm looking for, and then I could cut it. I could use that to do my cutting. So that's a way you can kind of do a little bit of both of these techniques, where you're keeping it fluid because maybe you're drawing it as you go, or you're building it as you go along, and you don't have a, you know, a predetermined picture. You can use that to get the right shape that you need for that project. So just an idea. Okay. I could bring that same pattern if I wanted some symmetry, but you know what? I'm going to let my OCD perfectionist side go and not try to make it symmetric. And this little ear keeps popping up. I do want it to stick down, so that is important. I could always go in with some, well, this isn't even, yeah, like I said, this is really like, I think, you know, cheap dollar store glue, so it's not the best adhesive. I could go in there with some acrylic paste, because acrylic paste is a little drier. It's a thicker gel. So you want it like the heavy gel acrylic. That's going to be a little bit less liquidy than if it's more fluid. The more fluid it is, the more water contents in it, and the more it's going to buckle your paper, your thinner papers. And especially because I'm using this really thin, you know, paper from advertisements, it's very, very thin and very prone to buckling and getting air pockets. So that's partly why I wanted to use the drier glue, but you could get the heavy gel and that would help. That would probably work okay too. Okay, I love my owl and I enjoyed this process better than this process, but I think there's a way to do both. I am going to just quickly do my just on this. I think I'm not going to probably do it on the owl because I think that's a little bit kind of goes together a little bit better, but I think I'm going to take it. I'm going to start with a Sharpie maybe. And I'm just going to draw in my lines between just to make it more like a stained glass, because this looks like it could be a stained glass window behind the owl. And that's going to fill in all of those, all the white areas, the black that came off because I use really too cheap of printing toner, because I use a laser printer for this, but my toner, I buy the cheap toner and it's not as good. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'd probably go in with some Mod Podge over the top of it when I'm done. Just a really light coat just to cement it down, because I just feel like this glue stick's going to lift up. And it's not just that I didn't get enough on there. It's just, I don't think it's the best quality. I'm not going to put the ink around behind him because he's not part of the stained glass. But I can fill in anywhere that there's like this part, I can fill in that. Anywhere that is white, or you can always just add more black, make it thicker. Like I said, black hides a multitude of imperfections. If you want to get glue underneath these little tiny pieces, it's really hard from the glue stick. So you could just take a, I should use the blade. You could take a little, you know, tool or something, get a bit of glue on there, and then just go underneath and put it on there. that's a good place to stop at 9:17. All right, so there's part of it. I'll post the picture of when I finish it. But yeah, I think it's fun. I think I'll continue to do this style for the remainder of this, but I really like the sort of freestyle with the owl. I may do freestyle down here too. I don't know, but you'll find out. I'll post the picture. So let's get to, let me pause the video and show and tell. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Healing Art After Hours. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment if you appreciate the content. Thank you so much. And as always, happy creating. Bye.